Hello and welcome back to Rewildology, the show that explores conservation, travel, and rewilding the planet. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell-Norman, conservation biologist and adventure traveler. We as conscious consumers have seen a spike in quote-unquote green companies in recent years promising they're committed to sustainability. Most even have a well-written sustainability plan to go with it. But once we start peeling back the layers of their promises, we quickly see that a lot of these green claims are not substantiated with true science and sound business practices. So, what does it actually take to turn a company green? Can one company inspire entire industries, such as music and podcasting, to change their practices for the better of the planet? And how does one even begin to tackle this monumental task? To explore this very important topic, today we're sitting down with Andy Land, the head of sustainability at Focusrite, a top-of-the-line audio equipment and manufacturing company. Like several other guests on the podcast, Andy's journey into sustainability was anything but straight. Trained in music and sound recording at university, Andy found that he really enjoyed the tech side of music and joined Focusrite over a decade ago, taking apart and fixing audio equipment products for clients. As he progressed in his career and his own personal exploration of sustainable habits, he noticed the need and opportunity to bring sustainability into Focusrite's practices. Luckily for him, the company also saw the importance of properly understanding and investing in this area, and so he became the head of sustainability in 2021, helping to develop and embed sustainable practices throughout the full product lifecycle. Andy and I chat a lot about his fun journey that went from music tech to sustainability expert, how a company can indeed make a sustainable product with recycled materials that is just as good as its current products, what it takes to develop accurate impact numbers, and resources for anyone else trying to turn their company green. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening, follow the podcast on your favorite social media platform, and maybe even share your favorite episode with a friend or two that you think would enjoy it too. Also, I'm working on some big changes to the podcast that I'll announce soon, and email subscribers will be the first in the know. If you'd like to join Rewildology's list, head on over to rewildology.com and sign up. All right, friends, here is my conversation with Andy. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for coming on the Rewildology podcast today and talking about a new topic for the show, even after almost 80 episodes. I'm very excited to give this new story of how do we green or how do we change an industry and be a leader in it. And so really excited to really just pick your brain and dive into your knowledge. But of course, you haven't always been in conservation and sustainability. So what's your journey that led you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. So, yeah, my route to a sustainability career has been, like you say, not the traditional way through education to study the topic in an academic sense. I was thinking about how I would answer this, because if I go back all the way to what I was originally interested in when I was much younger, I think there were a couple of themes. I always liked music. I always liked design technology as a subject, and I like science. So I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in the UK, we often get careers advice at school. And I remember being going through the questionnaire to answer what kind of things you're interested in, try and work out what your career path might be. And I was told I could either be a music teacher or a civil engineer based on my interests, which was either of those was not necessarily what I wanted to be doing. And it didn't really combine all of my interests. So I ended up doing music and sound recording at university, which included the music side, a bit of the technology side, I guess. And I really like recording sound anyway. So I was that kind of ticked off a lot of boxes. But there was always the science side and the design side that weren't necessarily incorporated there. When I was at university, I think I in my mind, I thought I was going to end up at a recording studio probably. I went to this course and I was thinking, my ideal career after this would probably be a recording engineer at Abbey Road or something like that. which ultimately didn't work out. But to be honest, I think the 80-hour weeks that they may be working is probably for the best. So
Yeah.
I actually did a placement year, and that's how I got to Focusrite. So I did a placement year in the service department, and I found that working at a company that makes music technology equipment, it was actually far more interesting because I could look at the design and the technology side and see how projects come together to make a product at the end of it. So I really found that kind of clicked with me, and I had access still to all the same equipment that I would probably get at Abbey Road, and I could just use it on the weekends. So that was how I ended up at Focusrite, and I then graduated, came back to a full-time role, and in the service department that I was in, I moved up to becoming service manager eventually, and that then led to me to look at the environmental footprint of my department, where I was starting to have an influence over those kinds of things. There were a couple of people that had started at the time to maybe look at the environmental side at Focusrite, but nothing official, no full-time positions or anything. And I joined that group of people discussing the greener side of things, what we could be doing there, and that quickly meant I ended up chairing it, and one thing has led to the other, and I was telling the CEO, you need a full-time role in this, and that I should be that person. So that is how I ended up here, with very much operational knowledge of how a company works and knowledge of the products, but not necessarily coming from the environmental science background at university or anything like that. But yeah, that's how I got here.
So, just for a little bit of background for anybody listening, they might not know what Focusrite is. So, just really quickly, could you take me through a brief overview of what your company does, and then we'll transition into what you do exactly?
Yeah, so Focusrite is a group of companies with many brands in it now. That we've basically got two main customers. So we've got content creators, which is podcasters, musicians, people making sound for music and TV, that kind of thing. Anything where quite literally content is created. And we've got sound reproduction, where you've got let's say a live venue or a hospitality setting where you need sound reproduced in a space. So we make products, music technology products or audio technology products to fill those two segments, basically. And I guess today, probably be more speaking about the Focusrite side, where we make usually interfaces or audio interfaces so people can record music. But yeah, we will be talking about other things like this podcasting interface today as well.
So, why? I think that's the next, for me, that's the question that came to mind. Why did you decide that you wanted to look into the environmental footprint? Like, there's so many things that you could be looking at. Like you said, you're not necessarily trained in environmental sustainability. So, like, where did this idea come from? Were you inspired by like a video or the movement, or why did you
Yeah.
take this on?
Yeah, it's a difficult one challenge I've set myself, because if you look at the music tech industry, there's very few examples of anyone doing anything on environmental sustainability. There are a few pockets of people doing things, but most companies' websites don't even feature the word environment, or they're talking about a studio recording environment, which is not the same thing. So yeah, it is a bit of a challenge because there's no precedent on how you get started with this. But I wanted to include that science side of it. I've always been trying to reduce my own footprint outside of work anyway. I think probably the thing that had the biggest impact on me was when I discovered the footprint of beef, and immediately overnight just stopped eating beef, and I don't think I've eaten it since 2014 when I discovered the footprint per kilo of beef. So that's that's what I've done on a personal level. And that immediately got me thinking about what we're doing at work, because that's something that we have so there is a relatively large footprint to what we do for the decisions we're making at work, and we need to see what we can do to reduce that, obviously.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's more of like a personal mission. Like, you were in your own life trying to reduce your own impact, and then seeing the correlations in your day-to-day at work, which we spend so many hours at every single week. So it sounded like it was more of just like a natural transition or just a natural expansion of what you were already looking into. Does that sound about correct?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the job I was doing in the services department, I've been hands-on trying to prevent unit products ending up in landfill by fixing them myself, and I've been doing that for many years. So in my mind, I was actually, when you look at what the department I was in was doing, we were actually trying our best to try and keep these products working for longer and fixing them rather than replacing them with new things. So that, and at the same time, we were also looking at product quality and trying to prevent units from failing in the field at the same time. And we had some really great success on that, and I think that work is still continuing. So I was already trying to do what I could to reduce the environmental impacts, and I've been in the job for a number of years and thinking, well, we need to do more on this. We're also getting to a certain size where we're a publicly traded company, and there were questions coming in about what we're doing on the environment. So it was quite timely in that sense that there was me thinking from my personal life, trying to improve my footprint and trying to improve my department's footprint, and then this outside pressure of shareholders asking us what we're doing. There's the over looming threat of regulation and things like that can affect businesses. So it actually made the argument quite straightforward, because everything kind of came together quite nicely.
And you happen to place yourself there at the forefront of it.
I think that was that was very lucky that all worked out.
Yeah. So I guess for context, when did you start working at Focusrite? When was the first you had like a service internship?
My placement year was in 2010. So 2011, I went back to university, graduated 2012, and I've been at Focusrite since 2012.
So you were well established. So like they knew who you were. So it's not like you were just like coming in like 6 months in, like, let's change everything you do.
Exactly. Yeah. So I when I joined, I think there must have been about 60 people at the company. And I remember it was around that because I could remember everyone's name, and we all fit on one floor of the building. Now I don't know what the latest head count is, probably about 500 people. So it's grown quite significantly. I must admit, I don't know everyone's name anymore.
Yeah, sounds like quite significant growth, which I can only imagine how difficult that makes your actual role itself, trying to reduce impact. So let's actually dive into that. So you are the head of sustainability for Focusrite.
Yeah.
That is one heck of a title. That is awesome. So what exactly do you do? What does your day-to-day look like? And I guess if you also, once you go through that, can you take it up a notch? And like, how do you take a massive, well-established audio equipment company and make them green?
Yeah, so day to day then, there's a lot of this will kind of depend on what comes in or what needs to be looked at. There is no set day-to-day rota that I follow, which I really like about it. There's no to-do list as such. It's what I deem is the most important thing to be done. But a lot of what I do, at least over the last year, has been trying to establish a really thorough baseline of where we stand. And I've been doing these life cycle assessments of products where I physically get a product, disassemble it to its last component I can realistically get to, weigh every component, build that back up with some conversion metrics, and then you can work out the environmental footprint of that product. So we've got over 200 products around the Focusrite group that we sell. I've managed to do this 38 times so far.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean that we need to actually do all 200 plus products, because a lot of our products are actually just bigger or smaller versions of one of the others. So I can speed that process up by kind of interpolating between them. If the product only weighs 20% more, assume the footprint is 20% more. And that's how you can kind of quickly build up a baseline footprint for the company. So that's basically taken me about a year to get to this point, and I'm almost at the point where on some of these brands, I'm actually starting to get to the point where I've got enough coverage of enough products that I can say with a reasonable degree of certainty that this is the footprint for this brand. There's a little bit more of that work to do, but ultimately I see that work going to be shifting towards new products, so we can focus exclusively on them, because I don't have any backdating work to be done on our footprint so far. So that's taken up a fair amount of my time. And that kind of leads on to any number of initiatives that maybe need to be done, because when I've looked at the footprint of a product, that doesn't necessarily tell me what the next action is. I have to go in with an open mind. So it could be that one very specific component is the biggest contributor to that footprint, and then I might go and speak off to someone else in the department, the hardware teams or something, and work out what we can do there. Have we got any options there? But equally, it could be that there's a range of different contributors to that's causing that footprint to be quite high. So it could lead on to anything else. It doesn't necessarily need to be design. It could be operations. It could be how we're shipping the product. It could be the packaging. It could be anything really. So that's why I don't necessarily have a day-to-day thing that I get on with every day. It's whatever needs to be done that I've uncovered so far. But the other big side of what I do is the corporate side, where we've got some shareholder relations. I may need to speak to shareholders, answer some of their questions. But equally, we've got compliance things. We've got to report our emissions. We've got to follow certain reporting standards. So those are pretty big projects in their own right. And yeah, we have to get them right because they need to be audited externally as well. So I think between those two, that covers most of what I do. But then equally, that doesn't mean someone's not going to message me. In fact, recently I just had one of the guys in the hardware team at Focusrite message me, said he's just done a beekeeping course. Can we get a hive? And now I'm looking into beehives and stuff. So it could be anything really that people are interested in.
Wow, that is amazing. Oh my gosh, I love beekeeping. That is so cool. And it's such a great example. So Focusrite is going to have their own bees now?
Hopefully, yeah.
Stop it.
We'll see.
If you can get that to the US, let me know. I might love to have some. Oh my gosh, that would be fantastic. So I think maybe on the next question, when you were saying this, sometimes when we are trying to change things, it's not always welcome, I guess is the best way to say it. When we're trying to make change, we're trying to make green changes. Sometimes there is pushback. Sometimes there's just conflict of some sort. Have you run into that much, or has it been relatively easy? I mean, changing these products I can't imagine that being an easy task. So what's that actually been like, actioning your ideas for changing these footprints?
Yeah, so it's I think at the moment there's enough low-hanging fruit and obvious things that we need to fix that have obvious alternatives and solutions available, that it's going to take a little while before we've exhausted that pool of easy wins, as it were. And we need to obviously go through that first and gain confidence in this area. So there's not actually been much conflict there, I wouldn't say. I think that, and in general, I think Focusrite being, I guess zooming out even further, musicians in general are generally pretty engaged with this topic of climate change, and they get the necessity, and often you find that they are some of the most vocal campaigners on these issues. So a lot of people at Focusrite are musicians themselves, and they care about this stuff very deeply. So it's not been difficult to convince people. The tricky thing is when maybe something costs a bit more. You have to put that in context as to, is that a cost now, or is it in 5-10 years time? Is that still going to be a cost versus digging new stuff out of the ground versus some recycled material now? So those things are pretty few and far between, actually. I'm finding actually a lot of the alternative materials don't cost any more, or maybe some of the initiatives we're doing could be a cost down. So it's not really been a problem, I would say, but that it helps that we're in the music industry, and a lot of people get this, that this is important, and our customers are asking for this as well because they're out campaigning for this stuff. So it's been a pretty easy sell, and it helps that the CEO's completely bought into this, CFO's completely bought in. It really helps that you've got that upper management buy-in.
Yeah, leadership is so key, because if they say yes, then everyone else has to say yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I really love that you bring up the music world, and also one of the reasons why we're sitting down today, I think people that are more inclined in this way are very open and maybe even willing to spend a couple more bucks if it means that we're going to have less impact. Like Focusrite is the only brand that I have talked about in any way, shape, or form. Like I'm currently using your Scarlett Studio, and the next product that I'm going to bring up is going to be a perfect example of where you all are going and why I'm so excited and actually open and
Mm,
willing to talk with somebody from Focusrite, like the head of sustainability, because clearly we have the same ethos. And most companies don't. There's no other way to say it. Greenwashing is real. And since there is a movement from a consumer base to make companies go green, they're cutting all the corners. But you guys aren't. And that's why I respect you so much. And so let's just shift to the new product then. So this Vocaster, as it's called, which is
yeah.
really cool, really exciting. Um, just tell me about it. How did this idea come to be? What is this product? How is it green? What was your hand in it? I mean, all the things. And yeah, so just go there and I'll ask further
Sure.
questions.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I'm kind of wary that this sounds a bit like an advert for a Vocaster, and really I want to focus on the green stuff here. So I will briefly hold up the product. This is the Vocaster 1. There is a Vocaster 2 as well. The product is basically for exactly what we're doing here. This is a product to help with podcasting and recording voiceovers and things like that. So you can plug a microphone into it. In fact, this is one of the microphones that comes with the studio version of it. I'm using the headphones that come with it as well. So you can get this set up and you can record stuff just like we're doing right now. And versus our interfaces, which are more for music creation, this one is kind of, it's got built-in features that help. In fact, right now I'm using some of the features on it to help my voice sound a bit more like it's on the radio. If I quickly turn it off, I sound a bit more distant and a little
Yeah.
less radio-like. If I turn that back on, hopefully I sound a bit deeper. I've got that radio voice. So yeah, it makes the process a lot easier. And I've actually been using it for a couple of days for Zoom calls and things like that. And I'm finding it is a big upgrade in terms of my sound quality versus using just the microphone on my webcam, and it's actually really easy to use. So the product itself then, so let's talk about the sustainability stuff and how it came about then. And so I found out very early on the products we're going to be designing. So very early on, I knew we wanted to create something for podcasting and maybe streaming, that kind of thing. So they said it was going to be a desktop type interface versus I've got a Scarlett here. So this sits flat on a desk and you've got the controls on the front. The Vocaster sits flat on a desk and the controls are on the top. So they told me it was going to be like that. It was going to be made of plastic, and that's roughly where it was where I started putting my input in. In effect, my input was, can we make it out of recycled plastic? The hardware teams went off and found a supplier of recycled plastic. And then we got a thumbs up from above to say, yes, let's use it. So it was almost as simple as that. In effect, there were many more steps to try out the material, see how it worked. But I think the resin that they found, the recycled plastic, was actually a really good option that they managed to find, because I think if you look at other recycled plastics that you see out there in electronics products, quite often they might be saying 40% recycled content, something like that. We've actually got an 85% post-consumer recycled plastic here, which is actually not far off the magic 100. So I think that's a really great resin to be using. To give one other high-profile example, the Microsoft are currently using, they're selling an ocean plastic mouse, which has a very nice color scheme, but it only has 20% recycled plastic in it, unfortunately. I think there are multiple reasons for that. They're going the ocean plastic route, which means that you've got much more in terms of contamination of the raw material. You don't know exactly what material it is that you're getting in, and that's why it can only be, I think, up to 20%. For something like this, we've got a vendor that is providing us recycled plastic that is from a known source. So this is ABS plastic, and I think a lot of the sources they've told us it's from is from like old printers that you see in offices, the really massive ones and things like that.
Oh, okay.
So they're breaking down specifically them and making this recycled material. Because it's a more controlled waste stream with a shorter loop back to new material, they can get this percentage higher. So I think it's a good option for us to be using, and it's got many other applications around the Focusrite group, which is very exciting. Vocus is obviously the first one we're trying it out with, but yeah, definitely not going to be the last by any means.
So how did you find that vendor? So I'm just trying to think of if somebody's listening, and I will ask a lot more about this too, like, because there is a sustainability movement in corporate world where like they are building sustainability departments. We have sustainability managers, like blah, blah, blah. Like this is really a thing
Yeah.
now. And a lot of these companies are products. How did you find this vendor? Did you find them specifically and connect them with the hardware team? Like, how did that relationship start? Did it take a lot of sifting to find somebody to actually do this?
So yeah, that procurement process, I actually don't get involved with at all. In fact, I think in this case, I think what happened is because we use contract manufacturers to make our products, I think we went to the contract manufacturer and we said, can you get some recycled plastic? They looked at their vendors and they said, yes, we've got one on the books that has this recycled plastic available. So in that sense, it was quite fortuitous that we didn't, at least as far as I remember, I don't think we needed to do that much searching. In this case, it was quite easy for us. There's definitely going to be other more challenging problems, I think, in the future when we look at some more niche materials, perhaps, rather than ABS plastic. But in this case, it was actually quite straightforward. And I think there's a lot of this stuff we're seeing it's ramping up in supply options available in the Far East where these products are made. So these sources are available is what we're finding. It may be that there's a bit of a procurement battle between companies to get the supply of it. I think recently we found out that cardboard, for example, they'd run out of recycled cardboard in China, was the rough message I was told, and we couldn't get it. So yeah, but at least we're in that process of trying to get this material, and we're demanding it from our vendors, and I think that's really helpful to help drive that that supply chain and closing that loop. So old products that are recycled do have an actual place. Someone's going to buy the material at the end of it. I think that's really important.
Yeah, because if the demand isn't there, then what does a company have to actually make the product from a recycled, just raw material to be put into something else? Which is, I found really interesting, just having done so much research into this myself, and I'm sure you have as well, that buying something recycled is almost always better than buying something that is just degradable, like naturally biodegradable, because you are fueling the economy to create more recycled materials as opposed to just throwing something away. So that is always my goal, is like go for, and I didn't know that intuitively. Like I had to talk to some other experts that are essentially trash experts. And they were like, go for the recycled materials because you are helping to basically put your dollars where your mouth is. Like you said that you want this, so then support the companies that are making that. And so that sounds like really on point to what you just said as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's obviously part of it. And I think even as a worst case, even if you are trying to recycle something and that there is no market for that, at least you're putting it out there and making that price. I think the economics of it need to level out, so the recycled option is cheaper than getting new stuff out of the ground, particularly plastic, where you have to have an oil rig somewhere offshore to get oil out of the ground usually to make this stuff. And I just can't see how that should be more expensive than recycling material that's already out there. And that's exactly the same for metals and mining stuff out of the ground. That shouldn't be a process that's cheaper than just taking existing metal, melting it with an electric furnace and reselling it. So yeah, we need to make sure we're kind of embedding ourselves within those material loops. So we're buying that material.
And I think this next question, you've kind of hinted on it, and I would like to address it more head on. So this price versus quality thing, sometimes it's hard to make the argument that having an 85% recycled plastic new product is going to have the same quality as maybe something that was just brand new, spick and span off off the lot, just like this is brand new. All the products are new. So
Yeah.
how do you balance that? How do you make a new product that you can market and it really does have the same quality and the same integrity? Because I know that your company is really big on having really high quality products. So just how do you do that?
Yeah. So I'll give the example on the Vocaster, and then I've got another example that I'll go through as well. So the Vocaster, there's basically this. When I was looking at the plastic of this, there's basically four use cases of this plastic that are unique here that I think are interesting to have been trialed with this recycled material. So firstly, we've got the structural strength. The product needs to be physically strong enough, and this does not flex or bend. It behaves exactly the same as regular ABS. So it kind of passes that test. The quality is there. It is structurally sound. If you look at the bottom cover of this, actually, there's this kind of speckled finish in it, and that's nothing actually to do with the recycling content of it. It's actually a design decision to put in these white flecks of slightly higher melting point plastic to give it this speckled finish. And that again is another new use case. I don't believe we'd ever done that on a product before. So introducing, in effect, purposefully adding defects to the product, and still it's got that structural rigidity, so it can handle these speckles in it as well. Third thing that's interesting on this, there's a button on the back for the power for the microphones. That's actually part of the chassis and is a flexible, thinned out piece of the plastic. So with normal ABS, you can do that perfectly fine. And on this recycled one, we're still able to do that flexible, thinner bit of plastic, and it's perfectly fine again structurally to handle that flexing. So and then the final one which is quite easy, and there shouldn't have been any issues with any of it, but this red ring we've got around the edge, this is actually part of a sub panel that goes across the front of the unit that holds the main structure. This bit that you've got on top, unfortunately, is not actually recycled plastic, because that needs to be semi-transparent, and that's a different type of plastic that we need to use for that. But underneath there is the main structural top panel of that, and that has a painted red ring around the edge. So again, we're painting that, and the recycled material is perfectly fine as an option there as well. So between those four kind of features or use cases of this plastic, it's passing on all of them, and there's no issues with any of them. So quality wise, there's no difference. If we took the speckles out, made one of our other products out of this, and just kind of dropped it into the tool, you probably wouldn't notice that there's any difference. And to give the other example, we've got a Scarlett here, which is actually made out of recycled aluminium. And at a recent Investor Day, I was walking around with two Scarletts, one recycled and one not, and nobody could tell the difference between them. Wow. So quite literally, the quality was not affected by using recycled materials. And yeah, you've got a Scarlett in front of you, and this probably looks exactly the same. So
yeah, it does.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the quality.
That's really helpful. It's really, because it is an honest thing to think about. It's like, okay, well, if I do get the product that is, because this is stuff that we have to think of as consumers, that it's so difficult to piece through. It's like, okay, do I get the brand new item that is probably going to last 10, 15 years, or do I get the recycled one that might not last as long? And so being aware of that as like the builder, the person in sustainability, like that is a real question that, I know I ask that all the time. And just as you said, musicians and podcasters and anyone else that's definitely listening to this podcast are going to be more interested in the more sustainable option. But then there is other things you have to weigh. Is this product going to last as long? And that's an honest question. So to hear that you, like, luckily there's someone like you to actually think all of this through and like to test these things. And yet, yes, this should last just as long. And do you see this like Vocaster, or I don't know, do you think it as being like a launching point to like green, or hopefully green, like the entire line? Like, do you see this like extrapolating out all the way, or how far can this go?
Yeah. So I think the way I'm approaching this is less on a product by product basis, and it's more, I guess you could say, just an initiative based process. So I've got so to give the one that's slightly further along, we've got the recycled aluminium on the Scarletts, and this works perfectly fine for an extruded body of a product like this, and that aluminium is going to be carried over to every other instance of aluminium that we've got steadily. Exactly the same with the ABS. We're going to be moving this ABS over to every other instance over time. And I think it's really great that we've got this. We've got these two products now kind of running at mass production scale. So we're building up knowledge of this, working out if there is any difference. Because on some of these, there are slight differences with how you have to handle the material in production. But once we know those things, we can just adjust around them and manage those processes slightly differently. So we've got this product, which is actually quite small, relatively speaking, that we're now building up to mass production, like I said. But we've got much bigger plastic products. If you look at the Novation products that we've got, the keyboards, big 61 key keyboards that we've got, they would use much more plastic to create that kind of size product. So we need to see how this works. Seems structurally fine to me. And if we can scale this up to some of the other bigger products, that's going to open more knowledge up to us, so we have the confidence to use this in more instances. So yeah, definitely this is the start of I guess that process of rolling it out. And the way I'm approaching it is less that this is a product. This is, when I look at this is a test case for recycled ABS. There will be test cases, I imagine, for recycled HIPs or high impact polystyrene, for steel, hopefully, down the line, and other just kind of core material types that we can hopefully swap in recycled alternatives. And each of those will impact the entire product portfolio ultimately.
And I think the next natural question after this is, for anyone more inclined on the sustainability side, one of the biggest issues we have with our economy is it's all linear. It's you buy the product, it's made new, you buy the product, you use it until it's gone, or until it's done. It's no longer used for its original purpose, and then it goes to a landfill. So there's a big movement now and a lot of talk on this circular economy. And I read in depth, of course, because it's me, your company's commitment to sustainability statement. And this is mentioned, a circular economy. And I would love to hear more about that and where you all are in that and how close you are, or how do you plan on implementing this? Because it is really a big problem. And so the fact that you're addressing it is really exciting. So how do you hope to make this a circular economy?
So the circular economy, for anyone who hasn't heard the term, it's basically where your raw materials for making new products are the leftovers are taken directly from old products that can be recycled. And in an ideal world, that is a completely closed loop, so you can make new Vocasters out of old Vocasters or something like that. So we need to think about what we can do to have the biggest impact on that. And I think the first thing we need to do is obviously start using recycled materials. So at least someone else's waste stream is going into our products, which is why I've put so much emphasis so far on recycled materials that we're putting into the products. But equally important is end of life of our products. And this is something that is difficult to find out a precise answer on, because we sell lots of these and they go around the world. So I can't say exactly where every single one of them ends up. But I don't believe these kind of products end up in landfill as such, compared to a milk carton or something like that, where it's definitely a more throwaway short-term product. There's definitely secondhand markets for these kinds of products that they pass through hands multiple times, and it's difficult to say that they actually end up in landfill. But in terms of how we're building these products, there's nothing about these that can't be taken apart with hand tools. There's very few components that or mechanically there's very little on our products that would be permanently bonded together. There'd have to be a very good reason for us to glue something. It makes taking the sustainability side apart, it makes it difficult to manufacture it in the first place if you have to glue something together. So by having an easy to assemble product also means it's an easy to disassemble and easy to recycle product. So if you take something like a Vocaster or a Scarlett, they're actually not as far as you might think away from being what you might call a circular product. If we can get the recycled materials in up front, we're actually doing quite well, I would say, on that. But obviously that's something we need to communicate to customers, so we can say exactly how you recycle these products, breaking down the materials, how you disassemble them, and that's definitely something that's on my roadmap. But like I say, because I don't think many of them actually end up in landfill in the same way that kind of single-use plastics will, I think getting the recycled materials in up front is probably the priority that we need to focus on for the time being.
That makes sense. And do you see maybe like further down the line, like a whole, what's the word I'm looking for? Like almost like a ship back to us, like, and then we'll handle the flip, or if it's still in great quality, selling it as like secondhand. Like I also love photography. And so a lot of the name brands, you can go to their websites and buy certified reused, essentially it's like secondhand of their cameras or something like that. Are you envisioning maybe something like that down the line, or do you think that that's possible?
So that's definitely something we do, and a lot of the products I used to fix in service would be sold on as B stock. So we've been doing that for many years, and that again it's something that I didn't really frame as a sustainability initiative at the time, but is obviously something that's helping towards that goal. So we actually do quite a lot of that, and I think in the UK there is a law that you have to, as a manufacturer, take back any of your products as waste and recycle them anyway. I don't know if any customers have actually taken us up on that, but that is something that we do offer as well. But yeah, trade-in schemes and things like that allow you to reclaim the product are always great things, because they help kind of close that loop and make sure that a product could be recycled perfectly fine by a customer, but if it comes back to us, we've got more control over that process. So that is definitely something we're going to be looking at.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for exploring that with me. So let's say that somebody listening is also in more of a sustainability role, like they are trying to create the least impactful, the best products possible at their company. And since you've started this from scratch, you literally made a role that didn't exist before. Yeah. Did you have any resources that you really found helpful? Or the main reason why I'm asking, someone might just be starting this out for themselves, brand new. Like they might not know where to start, or maybe they're going into a company where they're going to do something similar. And along your journey, did anything really help you, like take a leap forward or answer your questions, or any resources like that?
Yeah, so it's probably not very helpful an answer, but I didn't find much useful stuff when I was trying to work out how I could do this stuff. But I have had this validated by another company because they took the same approach. One of the first things I did was just take apart a product, like I said, take it apart to as many components apart as you can, weigh everything. And if you just go online, you can find out the rough footprint for aluminium, for plastic, and other standard materials. So that is definitely one of the very first things you can do if you're making physical products. So it is a time-consuming process to try and build up a process like that. But to give you an idea of how much more efficient it's become, when I do that now, in fact, just this afternoon, I was taking apart another product which had 227 components in it. Only 67 of them I hadn't footprinted before. So using my existing data, it's now a much faster process where there's much less work for me to do every time I take apart something. And particularly if you've got products where they share a lot of components, you can start to speed that process up. But then I have done this 38 times. So I've got a lot of existing data I can call on. But yeah, that's a great way to get started. And something else I would say is find online webinars from companies that seem to be doing quite well at this and see what they're saying. So one of the ones I started out with was looking at The Economist and their events. So they run a sustainability week, which is very useful because you get a range of different companies there, from IKEA to Microsoft, and unfortunately a lot of fossil fuel sponsorship. But it's one of the ones that I go along to as much as I can listen to them, just to see what they're saying and keep a tab on what's going on there. But the ones like IKEA and Microsoft are really interesting. IKEA, because they've got so many products and they talk in a very plain way as to how you approach this. I think something I learned from them was that they were saying, if as long as you can get it about 60% accurate for the footprint of your products, that is good enough to make business decisions to decrease the emissions from there. So that's quite a good rule of thumb, because you're never going to get the footprint completely accurate of something. And Microsoft is really interesting because they obviously have a lot of data knowledge and IT knowledge. So how you handle this data is really interesting to see what they're doing with it, and how you can take inspiration from how they're organizing things there. So yeah, I would say take apart a product, physically get hands-on with them, and then see what some of the best practice people are doing, because what I've found is there's not really a how to get started with this guide that exists out there.
Yeah, thanks. Those were great tips. And I'll definitely be sure to put those in the show notes as well to see if anybody else wants to check out those, because that sounds really interesting. Even as I'm not technically in sustainability, just I'm not developing an actual product, but that sounds absolutely fascinating, even from a consumer standpoint. What are these big companies doing? Like, who should I be supporting? Because again, everything's so greenwash. It's really hard to tell who's doing what and why. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's move back to you. As I said in the previous question, you are carving your own path. Like, you're going into the unknown, which is really exciting, but also at the same time, there's no way this can be easy. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, what would you say has been the most difficult part of your journey, or what have you struggled through the most that maybe you've overcome or you might be still going through?
Yeah. So the single most difficult thing I've encountered, other than where to get started, but I think that's kind of, I know where I'm going with that now, and that's kind of a problem that's solved for me, at least. The single biggest problem, I would say, is how you handle all of this data, because there is a lot of data. And even though I'm pretty good at Excel and I used to calculate failure rates when I was in the service department, this is another step up in terms of how much data you need to handle. So I think going into this role, I thought there was such a thing as a carbon footprint for a product. I know now that is a load of nonsense. There's no such thing. Even if you look at the greenhouse gas protocol, there are 7 greenhouse gases that are called out there. So immediately there are 7 footprints per product that you need to be aware of. And that doesn't even include other things like the water footprint, or to go really specific, you can get to liquid waste that's discharged into river waste. That's a category of emissions that is out there. And there are hundreds of these potential pollutants for every material type and every process that exists. So even if you're looking at one product, there is no such thing as a single footprint. There are many, many of these different footprints that need to be calculated. And that's before you've even looked at how many routes to market you've got as a business. Just how many times, how many combinations of how you can sell this product to a customer. And then the time factor of which years, because the electricity grids change in their emissions every year. So there are so many moving parts. I just quickly worked out, just to give an idea of how many potential routes you could get. Let's say a product has 250 components, which is not unusual. And let's say there's only 150 pollutants to track, which again is not out of the question. Immediately, for one product, you've got 37,500 profiles that you need to be looking after.
Whoa.
And then there's 500 routes to market, which again is not unusual. So you're at 19 million rows in your table already. We sell 250 SKUs, 4.7 billion rows if you do it the brute force route. So there's obviously a better way to handle this data than just going the brute force route. But yeah, you could very quickly end up with billions of rows. And that's actually something I ended up getting into a data cul-de-sac or dead end where I just couldn't load the data set anymore very early on. And yeah, I've had to rethink how I store this data quite a few times. But now I think I'm on my way to a better solution for this, which is far more efficient. But yeah, I don't think I thought I could do this in Excel when I started. You can't use Excel if you want to do this. You can get started in it, but definitely need to go on to more advanced tools to try and handle this data. But you have to do it to this level of detail unless if you want to be setting, say, a decarbonization target, in my view at least, if you want to work out exactly what you're going to be doing for the next 20 years or so, through this method, I can eventually, when I've got my data in the right format, I could say, well, let's use recycled ABS in all of our products from 2024 or something like that. How does that impact our footprint? Because we've got the sales forecast, we can say emissions from grids are going to improve 5% a year, and you can swap in this new material and see how our footprint changes. So once you've got that level of detail and granularity, you can make that kind of decision to swap in hypothetical materials and see how your emissions are going to change in the future. And I don't see how you can decarbonize and reduce the environmental impact of a company without going to that level of detail to be able to answer that question definitively and work out what is the best thing that you can be doing now to try and reduce your impact. So yeah, I'd say the data is the biggest challenge that I've been working on. But yeah, I think I'm getting there with it.
Wow, I can see why. And also too, I think that helps put it in perspective, definitely for me, someone who's never developed a product from scratch, and hopefully for anybody listening as well. I mean, no wonder why so many companies just make these blanket statements, because who knows if they have someone as dedicated as you or knowledgeable or the resources to figure out their footprints and on that level to decarbonize. So that's awesome. But let's flip this around a little bit. So that does sound very overwhelming. And some days you're probably just like,
Yeah.
oh my good God, I don't know. I don't know. Like I just need a glass of wine or a whiskey and just not think about it for a second. So what is your motivation for doing this? Why are you still going? And like, what's your greater goal that you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, I think the big, hairy, audacious goal sitting over this is that I think music tech should be one of the leaders on environmental sustainability, and I think there's no reason it couldn't be. We have the customer base that is very active and engaged with this. We're in technology, so we can take advantage of how technology is adapting to this problem. Because if you look at what Microsoft, Google, or to go on the far more proactive side, Fairphone, for example, they're doing great things with sustainability and using recycled materials and so on. So I don't think our products are anywhere near as complicated mechanically as something like a mobile phone. A lot of music tech products are quite easy to disassemble and maintain and fix and keep going. So I think music tech could be a real environmental sustainability leader. I think the whole industry should become as green as possible. So that's really what I'm trying to influence. And we've got a statement on our website that says we want to become environmental sustainability leaders in our industry, which is very audacious in its what it's trying to achieve. And I think we should be aiming to be that leader. And if you're a leader, that means everyone else is trying to follow along as well, rather than just kind of not paying attention to the environmental footprint of their products. So yeah, I think we should be trying to make the entire industry as green as possible.
Which I know someone like me really appreciates. I grew up in a very musical family. Like I was a drummer. I'm taking a little bit of a pause, but my dad's a drummer. My parents had a band that that's how I grew up. And so my best friend and her husband are Nashville artists. So that's just the music side. And now that I'm in podcasting, this is needed. Like we want these things. And so to know that somebody is actually stepping up to the plate to give us what we need as more environmentally conscious consumers it's awesome. Like I'm so appreciative of that. And hopefully more companies follow, just like you said.
Yeah, I definitely want others to follow because, as far as I can work out, I'm the only person doing this full time in
Wow.
music tech. So yeah, I guess an open call. If someone is listening in music tech that does this full time, do contact me because it'd be nice to know I'm not the only person.
That would be awesome. Collaborating, so much fun. So, what advice do you have for anybody listening? And this could be anything. This could be high level. This could be if you could just share a message. What would you love
Mm.
that to be?
Um, it's difficult, difficult one to answer. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I would say what I've learned probably the most is unless you've gone well, just considering my own examples and the journey I've gone on, unless you've taken apart a product, for example, let's bring it back to the products. Unless you've taken apart a product or a system or something and you understand completely the entire footprint of that system, try not to have any preconceptions about what is going to be the most polluting part of that system or product. A lot of people have these preconceptions that certain things are going to be very polluting. To give an example, when we were looking at the aluminium, I thought aluminium's got a relatively low melting point. It's probably not that polluting versus steel, which is a much higher melting point metal. As it turns out, steel was about 5 or 6 times less polluting per kilogram than aluminium.
Wow.
And it's just because of the processes required to refine aluminium versus steel. And that is something I didn't realize at all. So that's why we started with the aluminium on the Scarlets. But it's that kind of completely open mind and going in without these preconceptions and just following the data and the science to understand before you make a snap judgment. And that might be why I might, in my role, maybe deprioritize certain things that people see as maybe they feel these are really important things to them, but I can see the data and it's just not going to move the dial almost. I need to focus on these big things that are going to get us an environmental win much sooner, because that's what we need to do, is prioritize that. It's about the cumulative emissions by net zero that we need to be looking at. It's not that we're going to miss net zero. I think we, as Focusrite, will hit net zero emissions, but it's about the cumulative emissions by the time we get there. So we need to reduce as fast as possible immediately, because then the overall emissions by the time we reach net zero will be lower. So yeah, keep an open mind when you're looking at these things, and try not to be swayed by any preconceptions.
That's really good advice. So you made a call out earlier, and I always love to ask if somebody wants to get a hold of you and maybe ask more about your process or how they could get started, or just, Andy, how the heck are you doing what you're doing? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I don't go on social media or anything like that, really, other than LinkedIn, which is which is the business one. So yeah, I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on there. But we do actually have a sustainability at focusritegroup.com email address. Within reason, I can't answer every customer emailing in to that email address. So it may be that our customer support team answers that. But if someone is, from another company that wants to understand this process, or they're just starting out on their journey, I'm happy to talk, particularly if it's a music tech company. Because as I say, we should be trying to green that entire industry. And I would say email that address or find me on LinkedIn. So it's sustainability@focusritegroup.com.
Okay, awesome. And of course, all of that will be in the show notes if anybody wants to reach out. Because like I said, podcasting, music, we all of us have our hands together. So there might be someone listening who is really, really interested. But yeah, Andy, this has been so much fun. Thanks again for sitting down with me, and I can't wait to share everything and all the amazing stuff you're doing.
Great. Thanks very much for having me on, Brooke.
Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of Rewildology. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button to never miss a future episode. Do you have a cool environmental organization, travel story, or research that you'd like to share? Let me know at rewildology.com. Until next time, friends, together we will rewild the planet.